So why did so many young men vote for Donald Trump? Because something very unusual happened in this last US general election. Normally, younger people vote more progressive than their parents. That's been a trend pretty much throughout electoral history. But this time, young men, 18 to 24-year-olds, voted for Trump more often than their parents did. They voted more right-wing than their parents did. Why has there been such a shift in young men lurching towards the right and voting for Trump? This has been one of the most extraordinary features of the last election.
Something strange is going on with boys. A recent Financial Times report found that while young women are on average more progressive than their parents, as you'd expect from young generations, boys are becoming more conservative.
So the problem actually starts a long time before politics. Politics is the symptom of this cultural and social shift. It's not the cause of it. There are many factors that underlie it.
I get it that they're suffering. I get it that they have a lack of entitlement, that they can't find their place in life. Maybe there's a social and economic explanation for what's happened to them. Like, how did they get so alienated? Why don't they have jobs that are fulfilling? Why aren't they more fully part of communities that would help them see other values?
The first thing is, in terms of educational attainment, there's a massive schism now growing between girls and boys, an increasing chasm that is growing between the two. At every single level, from kindergarten all the way up to university, girls outperform boys now, in every year, in every age group. Of the top 10% of students in America, 2/3 of them are girls. And of the bottom 10% of school achievers in America, 2/3 of them are boys. And again, this is seen consistently in every single developed country in the world. So it's not just a US phenomenon, it's a global phenomenon. And that rightward shift in voting intention is also seen around the world too, in young men. This then also impacts employment prospects. There's been a solid and consistent downward trajectory in male engagement in the employment market for many years now, while women's engagement in the employment market has been consistently trending upwards. So less educational attainment, less engagement in the employment market than before, and also less success in relationships. 63% of men describe themselves as single, compared to only 32% of women. So not only is there less engagement in work and in training, there's also less actual experience of sustaining a relationship.
Look at the data. Look at what the data right now is showing about when it comes to young boys and employment. Look at what the data is showing when it comes to suicide rates that we're seeing with young men. Look at what the data is showing when it comes to, college attainment levels. College attainment levels right now are the same level as they were for men and boys back when it was in 1964.
So we're talking about a growing cohort of lonely young men who are either living with their parents or living alone. Now, this has actually been hidden for years, and it wasn't actually in plain sight. And the reason is that at the top of the employment pyramid, the picture is the opposite. There are more CEOs in top companies in the US with the name James or Michael than there are female CEOs. That's how rare it is, relatively, for a woman to have reached the very top. So at the very top of the economic ladder, women are still way behind. And that's often the thing that we see. So there still is a lot of progress to be made in women's equality. And that's why the lack of equality for men often goes unnoticed, because it's lower down the income scale and in education. Now there's one other major factor that impacts the mindset of men, and that is the way we define manhood and masculinity. You see, we have a very clear definition of what is toxic masculinity. All men, all young boys know the idea of toxic masculinity. But what they don't know, and what they don't hear almost anything about, is the idea of what is positive masculinity. There is no positive manhood notion out there. The most that people tell them is that, well, it might involve qualities such as sensitivity, receptivity, being more connected and collaborative, but these are qualities that are associated with women and femininity. So essentially what we're saying to young men is that in order to not be toxic, you need to be more like a woman. So this lack of positive definition of manhood is leaving young men in a vacuum of underachievement, lack of connection and relationship, and even a lack of definition on what it is to be who they are. And into this void steps the radicalizers, the influencers, the Andrew Tates and the misogynists of this world who teach men that actually you are special and you should lean in to those qualities that other people describe as toxic. Now I'm going to make another video about that culture, the manosphere and the incel culture, a true poison that is infecting young men and indeed our entire society, because the victims ultimately become women because of the violence that they teach and propagate. So I'll make another video to go into that in more detail. And the end point of all these influences and the whole ecosystem of this toxic manosphere is Trump. He then comes along as the ultimate personification of that mindset. Might is right. There are only killers and losers in this world. You must dominate. He demonstrates it to them perfectly, and so inevitably they're going to gravitate towards him. He is a walking set of grievances. I made another video recently about Trump's own history and his psychology that has led him to possess and emit such a constant sense of grievance, and that melds exactly with the sense of grievance that these young men have. Much of it justified given the fix they're currently in, but a lot of it enhanced further by these toxic influences and ultimately capitalized on and captured by Trump. So that is why so many young men were in an environment where recruitment to the Trump campaign was actually fairly easy. So to get them back, it's not good enough just to change the campaign or change the candidate or change the messaging. It has to go even deeper than that. It has to go into education and how we create positive role models again for young men to raise both women and men in education. It has to go back to employment, so we're raising both women and men in employment again. It has to also go into how we see relationships and how they're being promoted and how dating apps work. And most importantly of all, I believe, it has to go into helping men understand who they are, creating an idea of masculinity that is both actually masculine and also positive, and not being ashamed to say that. Otherwise, we're just leaving a vacuum for the far right to occupy and capture today's young men. Everybody needs a story, everybody needs a narrative. Human beings are unique in that respect. As well as oxygen and water and food and nourishment and love and affection and attention, we also need stories to understand who we are and how we work. And we need to reconstruct those stories about manhood. I aim to play a role in that, and I will describe a lot more of that in future videos. So I think this is essential. If we're going to fight back against Trump, we need to do it on every level, and we also need to do it especially for young men. And so I'm going to be playing a role of that in future videos. So what I aim to do here is not just for us to understand what it is that has led so many young men to vote Trump and to vote for right-wing parties across the world now, but also to try and chart a path of how we can change that trajectory and come together, men and women, to make progress in this world together. Thank you for watching my video. I'm a psychiatrist. I'm also interested in philosophy and public policy and politics, and I aim to make a number of videos about these subjects and particularly the intersection between them. If you're able to like and subscribe to this channel, then it'll really help, and also put in some comments whenever you can. That'll really help the algorithm. It'll really help promote this channel to other people. Now, beyond that, we are all, unfortunately, at the behest of a very small number of people who seem to run everything these days. And we are all at the whim of a tech oligarch who could decide tomorrow to end a channel like this because it's not in their favor. And because of that, I've set up a kind of email